Howdy, it's Jim Arado, and we're in Spring Mill State Park at their little pioneer village. And this is late March 2021. Yeah, and I thought I would just let you enjoy the natural sounds there for a while. It's a very natural place. Except for that bulldozer thing and a few modern instruments. But yeah, we're actually walking towards, there's a parking lot area, and then you kind of walk over towards the Pioneer Village. And there's some little streams and things like that. Obviously, it's been a little rainy here on this particular day. So there's some puddles. But there are several little historic homes through here. I got a brochure and I took some pictures of some of the historic markers. But these are some great old cabins kind of preserved around the area. You can stick your head in and they're kind of set up as life might have been back in the 1800s. And actually the grist mill that we'll see more of was built in 1817. Yeah, and this is as we're looking around, this is the very first building you kind of come across, and it's pretty spectacular. Yeah, there's the grist mill, and you can kind of get a good look at the first part of the village right about here. And in one of the small brochures that I got, I believe from the Spring Mill Inn, it's a brochure on Spring Mill State Park attractions. In the heart of Spring Mill State Park sits a pioneer village built around a grist mill constructed in 1817. Grinds daily. It's open from 10 to 4, May through October. And again, this was late March, so it's still open, still part of the state park. You can kind of go and look around. I've been here before, though, when they've had the, reenactors and there's a little more life to it when you come, I guess, during the regular season. And then it mentions the first couple of buildings that we've walked past. It says, entering the village, you first see the weaver's cabin, built in 1816. It sits on the site of the original tannery. Granny White's house, built in 1824, sits next to the weaver's cabin and is on the site of the original blacksmith shop. The home was relocated from Leesville, Indiana. Both cabins are dog-trot homes, simply homes with a wide breezeway that connects two enclosed halves of a house, all under one roof. Anyway, yeah, and so there's several buildings through here. I try to stick my head into almost all of them. I know there were a couple that we didn't, because there were some people kind of gathered in a couple. And we sort of avoided a couple just because, and we'd seen them before, so. But it is nice just kind of looking around these cabins and looking at the way that they've got them kind of furnished with the period furniture and the antiques. And they do have those little gates up, but they still give you a whole lot of access, which I think is pretty cool. And this is mostly, I'm sure I've edited out some of this. But this is a fairly unedited video. I think it's probably 20-25 minutes long, and I just kind of mosey around and film as we're walking around. And as you can see, you're kind of out in the middle of the woods. I like that. You really feel like you're somewhere fairly secluded, which I think is pretty cool. I believe that was the leather shop we just passed. Once home of Mizia Munson, leather worker in the village. The Todd cabin now sits on the original foundation. And then, of course, we're going across the little stream here. Yeah, and you can see that that wheel turning and the grist mill is doing its thing. And we'll walk inside here in just a second and see what's going on.
How we all doing?
Hey, how are you?
Doing good.
Yeah, and let me read, take note of that piece of art. I want to read just a couple of little small signs right here. It says, Artist Cheryl Ann Lawrence carved this piece using only hand tools in the Pioneer Village, summer of 2017. And then there's a little sign about the grist mill. The construction of the grist mill began May of 1817 and was completed late October 1817. In building the mill, 25,000 cubic feet of stone was used. The walls are 50 feet tall, 60 feet long, and 43 feet wide, and at the base are 3 foot thick. The craftsmen quarried the stone, carved it, and stacked it. Other craftsmen hewed the timbers and the gears. When completed, the mill was a tribute to the craftsmen of the day. This carving is our tribute to their memory on this, the 200th anniversary of the grist mill. And how about that? Yeah, and concerning where we're at now, the distillery is constructed on the site of the original distillery built in 1823. Corn was fermented in mash tubs and turned into whiskey in this building. Now this is the wood shop. And of course everything is very, there's lots of wood. And lots of information on distilling, on making whiskey, I guess, or making alcohol. Just love looking around at all this stuff. Of course, here in Kentucky, you can take all sorts of bourbon tours, just as a side note. You know, as I walk around some of these old buildings, they really remind me of my grandparents' home in western Kentucky. And they both passed away in the 80s. But I remember going over there, and there was always that kind of salty meat smell. Lots of wood, lots of burning smells, lots of tobacco. They and we all raised tobacco. But there's certain... When I'm in a little pioneer village like this, I'm reminded of how, my grandparents were still kind of connected to a lot of this lifestyle. I say that proudly. But I just think that's interesting. And going out a little bit. I know back at the grist mill, we have, I know the last time we were here, we actually bought some flour from there. And they usually have bags out for sale. I think in the gift shop. Their gift shop elsewhere was open, and they had some of it there. And we're stepping into the tavern now, which I thought was pretty cool looking. The original tavern, built in 1824, was a place to stop for a meal or spend the night. This building sits on the original site of the tavern, next to the Stagecoach Trail. And just so you know, there are some signs up in each of these little buildings giving a very detailed history of what was here, and the people that lived here, the people that ran the spots. I would read some of that to you, but I think it would bore you to tears. I think some of that stuff is more effective when you're there actually reading it. So yeah, in this little video, I'll probably just avoid that if you don't mind. And I believe, yeah, I think we're going into the Pottery Shop now. Just from the little brochure, it says the Pottery Shop is on the foundation of the 1880s hat shop that operated in the village. So yeah, and you kind of look around there and get an idea of what the Pottery Shop might have looked like. Love those old fireplaces. And of course the lighting going from inside to outside is not the best. I hope you'll forgive me for that. But I don't think it detracts. And it's nice kind of walking around outside along the grist mill, seeing how that operates and going through these little buildings. I wanted to point out, inside of the grist mill, there was a little kind of printer area with a little kind of printing press and all. They did it, and as you can see, there are a couple people kind of in costume. Just a couple, and we talked briefly to one of them back at the grist mill. But, I don't think he was really doing interpretation that day. He was just sort of there. But yeah, they had that printing press set up, which I thought was pretty neat. And I know we've been to other pioneer villages. I'm thinking there's one in Ohio. Yeah, Roscoe Village in Ohio. Really neat kind of pioneer town setup. I think it's $5 or $10 to get in there. And you can actually take a boat ride on a boat where a horse is pulling the boat down the river. Kind of like something that was done, in centuries of the past. But that's a neat little pioneer village. And I know they had a little setup with a printing press, and they were actually printing posters. Again, printing them in a way that would have been done sometime in the 1800s. And they printed up posters, kind of on vintage-looking paper. And I think you could buy them. I think they would sell them to you for like $1 or $2. It was ridiculously cheap. But they would do like reprints of the posters, of Abraham Lincoln calls for troops, that kind of stuff. And I bought a couple of their posters. And the girl doing the demonstration, she actually was making some little mini posters, something about World War I, because I think there was some anniversary of World War I when we were there, and she just would give those to people, like, here you go. And I thought that was great. I love that sort of thing, and I love when they're operating like those old printing presses, and you can actually, buy something that they've printed. Yeah, and just looking around some more of the homes. Yeah, I love the old fireplace, love the old beds and desks. And the tools, always love looking at the tools. And there's a great garden here, as you can tell. And lots of stonework. It's neat to think that, people actually did live here, and this was a town. This would have been kind of a thriving place at, 1817, as I mentioned. They also gave me another flyer kind of covering the village from around the 1860s. So there's, I know here at the state park, I found a couple different sites just with flyers about some of the attractions. And, I went home with quite a bit of reading material about the state park specifically. And like I said too, we spent a lot of time here at Spring Mill State Park. And I'll put up some more videos of the other stuff we did. We spent the night at the Spring Mill Inn, the State Park Lodge. It was nice. It was, it's dated, but it's still charming and it's very nice. They have a very nice restaurant there that I thought was a good value and served good food, and we had great service there too. There's just the state park with lots of trails. They have lots of caves at this state park. And Gus Grissom, legendary astronaut whose life was cut short during a training exercise.
Okay.
He is from this area, and here at the state park they have a museum dedicated to Gus Grissom. And I'll put that video up later too. And the little town, this is in Mitchell, Indiana, which is just kind of a nice little historic town. And we drove through the downtown area, and it looked like there were some nice antique shops. Looked like they had just kind of a nice little walkable downtown area. I'll have to go back and check that out more later. But yeah, and this was we've been to this state park before, here in southern Indiana. And it's not that far from some other great locations. Corydon, Indiana, I think is within an hour. Of course, if you're coming from somewhere far off. I love that painting. I just kind of focused on that painting for a while. Yeah, and if you're coming from somewhere else, if you're coming from, the Midwest or the West Coast or something, you're very close also to Louisville, Kentucky. So, there's a lot of history. And there's a lot to see and do just in this little area. Love the fence work here. I don't know a ton about that. I don't know how original that is. I need to look that up. I'm sure one of the brochures will mention it. Oh yeah, and the spring house is an original structure built around 1840. Cool water from the spring flows through the building, keeping the temperature low, acting as a refrigerator. That's something you don't get to see every day for sure. Yeah, they've got this little building with some old wagons and things like that. And speaking of my grandparents, again, I have memories from my very early childhood, probably early 80s. And I remember they had their barn, and they had a couple of wagons like what you see here. Not more of a flat wagon, but definitely a horse-drawn wagon kind of contraption that was old and kind of getting pretty rotted. But there was the seat and the steering wheel. I just remember they had a couple of old wagons that they used, I think mostly to put corn in. They put corn there. They were just kind of in the middle of one of their fields. But yeah, even into the late 70s, early 80s, my very, very pioneerish grandparents still had, that they had wagons. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Which I just thought was great, and I still think it's great now looking back on it. And my own dad, who passed away recently, was quite a hunter and spent a lot of time hunting and fishing, and he still, up into the 2020, he had a certain pioneer spirit that I think is almost extinct at this point. Oh yeah, this little building was great. It's the Apothecary. The Apothecary and Mercantile are both original buildings. The Apothecary was the office of Dr. Lemon and built in 1830. The Mercantile was the original post office and general store for the village. It was constructed in 1828. The post office operated in the village until 1859 when it moved to Mitchell. And I love those old medical images on the wall and just the jars of primitive medicines and herbs and things like that. This is, it's just great being in here. And there's there's definitely a smell and just a feeling of being in there that you can't capture in a video. So hopefully keep that in mind and go down to Mitchell, Indiana and check out the Spring Mill State Park. Just for that little apothecary building alone, if for no other reason.